Hey everyone, this is Chris Davis, your video and feature producer here at 4Player, and this is my list of the top 10 games of 2014. In the history of cinema, few films have ever been able to instill fear in the viewer as much as the fantastic 1975 film Jaws. That film alone implanted in the minds of the public a terrified fascination of one of the oldest forms of marine life known to man, the shark. For decades, developers have tried to recreate the Jaws experience in the form of a video game. To little success though, as these titles have focused on creating the experience of hunting the shark instead of the other way around. This year, however, we may have finally got to see a game worthy of the Jaws legacy. Depth. This rather unusual indie game hails from developer Digital Confectioners and began life as a student project in 2009 whose final product has a fantastic premise. 4v2 divers vs sharks asymmetrical multiplayer action. Anytime I hear about asymmetrical multiplayer, I'm interested, and man, what a fine job the developers did here. As a diver, you're tasked with guarding Steve, an unmanned submersible drone, as it hunts for safes filled with treasure on the seafloor. Sharks are tasked with the goal of simply wiping out the divers and reclaiming their territory. The results are both fun and dreadfully terrifying. Sharks dart in and out of the water incredibly fast, and can disappear in just a handful of seconds with a victim. On the other hand, however, divers are able to purchase an assortment of equipment and weapons by picking up treasure and successfully killing sharks, lending the game a good measure of balance. Though I've only been able to put a handful of hours into it due to its late release in the year, I've had tremendous fun with this game. It's a one-trick pony to be sure, as it has a limited amount of maps, shark species, and modes to play on, but it's a trick that's done very, very well, and it's more than worthy of your time if you're looking for a fun, team-focused multiplayer title. Ubisoft's revised and expanded Far Cry 3 was one of the best games of 2012, and it rightfully earned the number 6 spot on my list that year thanks to its greatly improved gameplay mechanics, intriguing animal AI, beautiful vistas, and simply gigantic environments. Far Cry 4, by comparison, isn't nearly the same leap in gameplay enhancements 3 was over its predecessor, and, by many measures, feels like more of the same instead of being a fresh new experience. That isn't to say Far Cry 4 isn't a good game. Far from it. Rather, it's not the next-gen Far Cry we're all hoping for. Ditching lush tropical islands for snow-capped mountains and deciduous forests, AJ Ghale's journey home to his war-torn country of origin, tucked deep within the Himalayas, saw him fighting for survival along intriguing branching story missions, all the while facing off against a vicious yet strangely kind ruler in the form of pagan men. Like Voss before him though, men is used quite sparingly, much to my disappointment. The level-headed warlord doesn't deliver the same amount of craze we got with our favorite drug-addled pirate lord, but what men doesn't deliver in insanity, he makes up for in his actions throughout the game, culminating at the end in one of the most thought-provoking moments I've experienced all year. It's something I won't spoil, but it easily makes you reconsider his involvement throughout the entire gameplay experience. I really enjoyed Ubisoft's latest entry in the franchise, and I'm very hopeful for the future of the series. It's, dare I say, a far cry from what I wanted, but the game still delivered. I think everyone has gathered by now that I'm not a fan of high fantasy. Well, anything. I'm a sci-fi guy. End of story. Orcs and elves, trolls and wizards? Not my thing. So whenever we get a new Lord of the Rings related title, I usually turn my head and walk in a different direction. And yet, here we are at number 8 on my list. So what about Shadow of Mordor allows it to overcome my inherent bias towards anything Middle-earth related? Simple. Because it doesn't want to play like one. Despite the setting, the characters, and the events that take place during this interim time period between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, Shadow of Mordor has no intention of following a traditional quest to save the world storyline filled with every single fantasy trope imaginable. No. This game is instead a revenge story of a man seeking to honor his family's memory so that he can finally join them in the afterlife. It's something that can be put in almost any scenario, any universe, and still be intrinsically entertaining. I'm always up for a good revenge story, and Mordor, despite some pacing issues and questionable character usage, it certainly is a fine one. Beyond the story, it's still a pretty decent game. Its take on Arkham-style brawler combat is fun, and the Nemesis system's light strategy elements make taking over the lands of Mordor quite enjoyable when all is said and done. My only real regrets with the title come from the Nemesis system not being as robust as it probably should be, and the fact that there are needless cameos of classic Lord of the Rings characters just for the sake of name cred. Not to mention the exceptionally sad amount of sequel mongering the game demands, right after probably one of the easiest boss fights this generation thus far. I've got my nitpicks to be sure, but Shadow of Mordor is a fine game that, like several other games on my list, will be so much better when we get to play the sequel. Comedy is always something that's hard to write, and in the case of video games, I have to imagine that it's one of the toughest tasks you could ever put to an entertainer. This is especially in cases where the humor is decidedly the most critical part of your game design. Sure, Portal 1 and 2 have great writing that will make you laugh over and over again, but that entertainment stands behind a list of great gameplay mechanics and level design. Jazzpunk's design philosophy puts everything in the exact opposite order, and, despite the challenge, succeeds wonderfully. Built around a sort of Monty Python-esque mishmash of James Bond and The Man from U.N.C.L.E. with a dash of classic film noir, the player is taken on an adventure through classic espionage tropes, for which the results are hilarious. While the main objective in each mission takes just a handful of minutes to complete, you'll quickly find yourself exploring the environment looking for every joke you could possibly find. A movie theater that endlessly plays a commercial for a failed toy from the 1950s? Check. Helping a cyberpunk frog with a mohawk retrieve a password cracker in a Frogger clone just so he can steal Wi-Fi from a coffee shop? Check. Explore a take on the Evil Dead wherein the zombies are actually human-shaped pizza? Of course! And that's all occurs in just the first level! Though the game is on the short side and will probably not last you more than just a few hours, it's pretty damn funny. You're gonna love this one. I get a lot of strange looks from people when I talk about Assassin's Creed. While I've until recently really enjoyed the series, I've always felt that the modern era focusing on the battle between Abstergo and the remaining assassin cells will be much more interesting than going back in time over and over again to revisit periods of history that decreasingly have no impact on the core meta storyline of the series. Watch Dogs, for all intents and purposes, is 2/3 of the way to that goal. Replacing forgotten civilizations and prophecies with advanced hacking technology and murder conspiracies, Watch Dogs is probably as close as we'll ever get to an Assassin's Creed set in modern times, and I'm almost okay with that. Almost. Watch Dogs to me was a mixed bag of great ideas and questionable execution. The concept of controlling the infrastructure of a network city through your cell phone, discovering and manipulating information, and unraveling a vast conspiracy as a vigilante running from the law sounds great. The gunplay is strong, and the hacking aspect of the game in almost all respects is well integrated into every aspect of the gameplay experience. However, the game suffered from several distinct problems, and I'm not talking about the visual fidelity compromises the game underwent from announcement to release. No, the main problem became the story. Aiden Pierce, even with a decent supporting cast, is simply a bland character. Monotone, lacking in introspection, and seemingly uninterested in anything outside the scope of his quest for vengeance for his niece, Aiden is simply lacking in anything befitting of the term memorable.
That was easy enough.
As a story guy, this is a big problem for me. At the end of the day though, I had a lot of fun with Watch Dogs thanks to its hacking abilities, as well as the rather fantastic multiplayer system. Hiding from another player you can't defend yourself against while stealing their personal data was some of the most fun I had all year long. If only I had time to return to it. Watch Dogs wasn't the game everyone wanted it to truly be. It's a good but flawed title that deserves a sequel, and if it repeats the same cycle Assassin's Creed went through, the next game might just be fantastic. I'm not certain that I could call myself a fanatic when it comes to Metal Gear games. Sure, I've loved almost every single one of them that I've played since Metal Gear Solid launched in 1998, but that doesn't mean that I haven't had a few distinct problems with some of them that I've released since then. This year didn't see the release of the Metal Gear game that I've wanted, nay, needed to play, since its pseudo-announcement in December of 2012, as we'll have to wait a while longer for the Phantom Pain to arrive. Instead, we got a taste of what's to come back in March with the release of Ground Zeroes, a prequel to potentially the biggest game in 2015. While I love what I sampled of this year's upcoming epic, Ground Zeroes left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth despite being number 5 on my list. At its heart, Ground Zeroes is a grand idea. Release a small playground level for players to gain an understanding of the mechanics of the Phantom Pain, throw in a few side missions, and get people pumped for the full product's eventual release. And, for the most part, it's executed perfectly. There's a decent amount of varied level design to give you a taste of the game's various mechanics, enough story content to bridge the gap between Peace Walker and the new title, and the visuals are simply wonderful. It's a decent product in and of itself. However, my main problem stems from the length of the game in comparison to the price. I don't have a particular issue with the length of the primary story mission, but I do find fault with the fact that Konami charged current-gen customers $30 for a game that is essentially only a few hours long in total. Heck, they wanted to charge $40 for it initially, before gamers cried foul over the ordeal and they changed their minds. I ask you, the viewer, simply, do you agree with charging so much money for such low content? At the end of the day, I've had a lot of fun. I've enjoyed getting a preview of what's in store for Big Boss and his compatriots, and I can't wait to play the Phantom Pain. However, Ground Zero simply needed more content for the price. That's all I'm saying. For nearly a decade, the minds at Infinity Ward were some of the wisest ever to develop in the first-person shooter genre. Today, Call of Duty is a billion-dollar business for Activision, as they devote nearly half of their revenue stream and development houses to its continuation. In the pursuit of the almighty dollar, Activision made a grave mistake in 2010 when they fired Jason West and Frank Zampella. With them went a quarter of the studio staff, including many high-ranking members, some of whom joined West and Zampella in creating Respawn Entertainment over at Activision's chief rival publishing house, Electronic Arts. We finally got to experience the fruits of their labors this year in the form of Titanfall, and man was it good! Just like their previous work, the team at Respawn created a frenetic, fast-paced shooter with great gunplay, fun map design, and a strong reward system to keep players in the fight and coming back for more. The comparison ends there, however. Titanfall's incorporation of an easy-to-use parkour movement system alone changes the Call of Duty style gunplay, as it allows players to easily take to the rooftops, ride on zip lines, and wall run to their heart's content, and thanks to very complimentary map design, it became one of the most fun aspects of the title. The titular Titans themselves serve as a fantastic gameplay opportunity that is smartly balanced with on-foot combatants. You feel very powerful when in one, and quite a bit safer when you have the AI do the driving for you as you run around on foot. Best of all, the game never punished you for poor performance, as Titans were unlocked over time in a match, allowing everyone a chance to suit up, and not rewarding those only with the best kill streaks. Titanfall is a damn fine game, though my only regret is its singular multiplayer focus. With these interesting worlds and weapons, it's easy to imagine a fantastic single-player campaign, but it seems like we'll have to wait around for a sequel. Until then, if you're looking for a good fast-paced shooter with solid mechanics, you'd be a fool to search elsewhere. Few would have believed that when the last generation of consoles arrived in November of 2005, that the most fun and exciting title at launch would not be Call of Duty 2, or Perfect Dark Zero, or Cameo Elements of Power, which was the next big 3D platformer from Rare, but instead a $5 downloadable title about blowing up shapes on a 2D plane. And yet, Geometry Wars Retro Evolved remains one of the best games from that generation. After Bizarre Creations was shuttered in 2011, some of the laid-off development staff went on to form their own studio, Lucid Games, for which the next entry in the Geometry Wars series is their premier title and the first published release for the newly revived Sierra Entertainment publishing house. And you know what? It's a great start. Geometry Wars 3 changes the nature of the series' play by shifting away from the traditional 2D plane to one based around 3D objects. Spheres, cylinders, cubes, you name it. The player has to fight against an assortment of lethal, vicious geometry shapes in order to rank up as high a score as they can before they run out of lives or hit a time limit. The new dimension definitely takes some getting used to, as you have to memorize new spawn patterns in a completely different way, and the shapes themselves often make it hard to see around corners, for which a pesky green rhombus is making a beeline for you. To help balance things, Lucid has included a set of sub-weapons that can be unlocked and upgraded over time to help improve your odds of survival. Veterans need not fret over the loss of the old ways, as the standard 2D planes and gameplay rules from the previous titles are included, along with the online co-op and single-player campaign modes. At the end of the day, Geometry Wars 3 is simply great fun. It's the same quick, addictive gameplay as it was nearly a decade ago when Retro Evolve arrived. You should definitely check this one out if you've enjoyed any of the other titles in the series. When Alien Isolation was announced, I had some serious doubts about the game. How can you make someone stay terrified of a single enemy for more than a dozen hours without desensitizing them? Why would anyone think that the Creative Assembly, known only for their work on strategy titles, would know how to make an effective survival horror game? How can we expect Sega to deliver a strong Alien game after the last one, Colonial Marines, was so bad? In reflection, I think I was justified in asking these questions early on, but man, once you put your hands on the controller and had your first close encounter with a xenomorph, you know that this is a game you'll come away very satisfied. One of the most striking things about the game to me is that it's not just a faithful representation of the technology and set design utilized in the original 1979 film, but more than just the visual design. I find myself shocked that it took so damn long for an Alien game to come out that truly felt just as foreboding and horrific as the source material. For the vast majority of the game, it's just you and one alien who's stalking you the entire time. That's it. Sure, you'll run into humans every now and then they're a threat, but you can pretty much be guaranteed that when death comes, it'll be at the claws of an eyeless, nigh unstoppable beast. And thanks to some great audio design, emphasis on hiding rather than confrontation, and almost unpredictable AI, the results are horrific, terrifying, any adjective you can think of. Throughout the nearly 18 hours I put into the game, I cowered in lockers, underneath desks and tables, and darkened ventilation shafts, praying it wouldn't find me, and I loved it so much. Alien Isolation isn't just one of the best Alien-related titles ever made. It's probably the most faithful gaming tribute to a film license ever produced. This is one everyone who enjoys the franchise should own.
Is my exit open, Ricardo?
Good stories can come from almost any source material if you just look hard or are creative enough to interpret it. Even the most unlikely places could be home to incredible tales of heroes and villains, terrific gains and terrible losses. Characters who've had no voice or any representation of a soul throughout their existence can come to life in ways you didn't think possible if you just put the right people to work on them. This past May, I got to see this very remarkable occurrence happen with the newest Wolfenstein game, a series that goes back to my childhood, and man, oh man, was I not only shocked by how well the character of BJ Blazkowicz was interpreted, I was enthralled. Wolfenstein as a series has only ever been about one particular theme: killing Nazis seeking to take over the world through supernatural means. That's about it. You enter a level, you kill Nazis, you take treasure, discover secrets, obtain new weapons, and move on to the next one, rinsing and repeating. It's always been relatively simple up until this year when Wolfenstein The New Order arrived and blew my expectations out of the water. Developed by Machine Games, made it primarily of former Starbreeze devs, the guys behind The Darkness and The Chronicles of Riddick, what you got was a solid story-driven epic starring Blazkowicz, more than likely the most unremarkable silent protagonist ever made. Unlike his previous games though, he doesn't stay silent. In fact, he's probably the most interesting character of this generation thus far. Introspective and observant, cunning and calculating, BJ experiences a shocking journey, from being on the ropes against the Nazi war machine, to a sudden leap 14 years into a dark future in which the Allies lost and Germany is all but taking over the world. This BJ Blazkowicz is easily the most interesting, emotional character I've seen in a long time in the first-person shooter genre, and anything less than stellar praise for the work Machine Games put into him is simply rude. Beyond just the scope of the main protagonist, the game itself is a fantastic throwback to classic run-and-gun shooters from the 90s. Strong and varied level design is accompanied by ridiculously overpowered weapons, very well-acted cinematics, smart AI, and, surprisingly, a well-integrated stealth system. Not to mention the timeline system the game throws at you, giving you slightly different tools, characters, and scenes to interpret as the game progresses, which all but demands a second playthrough to get the full experience. And you know, so what if you have to press a button to pick up things on the ground? Big fucking whoop. If that's your biggest flaw that you can find with this game that's preventing you from playing it further, then man, you need to reevaluate your criteria you use for playing a video game. Wolfenstein The New Order is a phenomenal game. In almost every single aspect, from start to finish, it's one of the best shooters to appear on the market in years. This is a game anyone should be proud to own, and it easily deserves the top spot on my list of the best games of 2014. Well, that's it for me, guys, and this concludes our staff top 10 list for 2014. This isn't the end of our Game of the Year coverage, though. We still got our award show podcast as well as the community top 10 games and highlights videos coming in the next few days, so please stay tuned. Thanks for watching, and I hope you stick with us in 2015.